This episode is brought to you by EFG Holding, a trailblazing financial institution with a universal bank in Egypt and the leading investment bank franchise in frontier and emerging markets. The interesting thing to me is that you made that recognition at a very young age. You were 29 when you realized this is not my world, this is not my life, I'm not happy. So you went on a meditation course, a 10-day silent meditation course, and came out of that with a sense of clarity, I guess, and a sense of new beginnings. You kind of realized, I'm going to let go of this and I'm going to start what I really want to do.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about defining moments sometimes. I know on your podcast you talk about pivot points. Going on this Vipassana meditation retreat, which for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's 10 days of complete silence. No reading, no writing, no music, no eye contact, no engagement.
No eye contact.
No eye contact.
Oh, wow.
No engagement with any external stimuli. The only thing you engage with is yourself. And, you know, the whole story of how I ended up going on that meditation is quite a long one, which we don't have time for. But what I'll say is, it rewired the way I felt about myself. Mm-hmm. It rewired the way I reacted to the vicissitudes, the ups and downs of life. Yep. And what I really took away is that, you know, life is fundamentally about struggle. You know, we all struggle. And I was struggling a lot. You know, I was in a way very privileged to have the struggle I was having. I'd gone to Harvard Business School and worked at this famous company, and I was making a lot of money and living a great life in a city that I loved, but I was still finding that I was struggling through that. I was not happy, you know, I was not fulfilled. And so the lesson for me was that it is in our struggles that we find ourselves and that we find our purpose. And I just knew my purpose was not linked to running around the world advising companies about business problems in industries that I didn't care about. Yeah. But what I knew was that there was some magic in the intersection between the creative side of me and the analytical side of me. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I just left that meditation retreat with a sense of clarity that my value, my sense of purpose was going to be linked somehow to bringing creativity and business together.
I think it's interesting that you took that leap of faith afterwards and you said, okay, I'm going to leave McKinsey. I'm going to follow my own passion. So clearly, you know, you've already said in the past that fashion was always something you were interested in as a child. You used to watch a TV show in Canada that left a big imprint on you.
Yes.
But that's one, you know, we all have these childhood dreams that we keep in our back pocket, but very few people act on them. Yeah. You actually did. How did that come about? How did you decide, okay, I'm really going to try this? So I think we're now 2007.
Yeah.
And you decided to begin a blog, writing about fashion, but you didn't have any contacts in the industry. You just started out just deciding to write about it. You had maybe one or two contacts and you began that way, right?
So I had spent the previous 8 months trying to set up an incubator for young fashion designers. And my observation in having interacted with designers in the industry is that, you know, no matter how creative and talented they were, the realities of business were kind of a rude awakening for a lot of them. So they would come out of these famous fashion schools like Central St. Martin's in London or the Antwerp Academy or, Parsons in New York. And they would be faced with a whole bunch of problems and challenges that no one in fashion school told them about, you know, and the industry was really good at kind of amping up and giving attention to all of these creative talents, but without really preparing them for what was to come. Sadly, that incubator lasted about 8 months, and I had to shut it down. Yeah. And
but it was a failure that led to eventual
It was
success.
a failure, but I met Diane Pernay, who's sitting here in the front row, and a couple of other bloggers. And I didn't even know what a blog was, right? I thought a blog was like a diary. But Diane and a couple of others who I met early on during that journey of setting up that incubator showed me that you could kind of share what you were experiencing. And like, this is before Facebook, before Instagram, before Twitter, before any of that existed. In fact, blogs were like the first form of social media.
Yeah.
It was the first place where you could say, I've seen something and it inspired me, or I've experienced something and I learned from it and I want to share that with you. And so really my blog that I started writing was a personal thing. It was a form of personal expression. And initially it was behind a password. It was only for my friends and family to see my journey from McKinsey to the fashion world. And when the incubator failed, I took the password off that blog. I designed a little banner in PowerPoint because that's what I knew.
What there was at the time.
And I called it The Business of Fashion.
Now you were just in Kuwait before coming here.
Yeah.
And so you've got this new arm to the business, which sort of does a deep dive in terms of the analytics of different regions, different areas of the business. And you just come out with a report on the Middle East and specifically the retail industry, right?
Yeah.
Walk us through that, because there are some really interesting nuggets that are, that we can pull out of there, primarily, which I had noticed and we talked about yesterday, this idea of localization, which is, most people today are much more interested in, especially in the Middle East. It's an anecdotal thing that I had noticed. People are, there's a pride in wearing your national dress. There's a pride in wearing local designers and featuring jewelry from your region, or highlighting the treasures, the heritage of your region. And you notice that in your report. How can that translate into dollars? How do the big brands in the West cater now to a market that is more inward looking?
Yeah. So the reason we did that report is we do a survey every year of all the executives, top executives in the fashion industry, as part of a report we put together with McKinsey, which, by the way, we now do a partnership with, which is like a full circle moment. And in that report, end of 2022, people were still quite worried about 2023. So one of the questions we always ask is like, well, what opportunities do you see? What markets are you looking at? And when we asked senior executives around the world, which market they were most optimistic about, which one they were looking at most closely, it was the Middle East.
And you were asking those questions in 2022, right?
End of 2022, right? So we do a report looking at, it's called the State of Fashion. We do it every year. So the State of Fashion report, that report said that executives around the world in the fashion industry were looking at the Middle East as the kind of, with the greatest optimism and excitement. So we thought, well, we should double click on that.
Of course.
And when we did our own research through BOF Insights, what we learned is that, some of the biggest challenges that luxury brands, international brands have when thinking about this market, and the market is obviously vast. Egypt is not like Kuwait, is not like Saudi, is not like Dubai. I mean, all of these.
And you have different spending power.
There's different spending power. There's different local traditions. I mean, but one of the commonalities that we found was actually that. The luxury executives, or the customers in these regions rather, they feel like a little bit the way these brands treat them is a bit tokenistic. And so some of the examples around Ramadan, for example, when the brands are issuing
the Ramadan kaftan look.
They're doing kaftans, or they're doing everything in green. They're just. It's the same phenomenon we see in China.
At Christmas.
China around Chinese New Year. They do everything in red with dragons on it. And the
very cliche.
Super cliche, and really not understanding that the customer everywhere in the world has access to the same information. So if they have access to the same information because of the internet, because of the transparency that provides, they have the same sophistication, they have the same nuances, they have the same awareness about all the brands. They want to be treated with a level of respect and understanding.
And intelligence.
And intelligence. And a reflection, of course, of the local culture and customs. And you can't do that sitting in Paris or New York or London without really empowering teams in local markets to inform you. One of the biggest lessons we learned, as the Chinese market was exploding, if you talk to the smartest executives, I mean, after 5 years of trying to dictate everything from the headquarters, they realized they get the best results when they hire really good people in the local market and empower those local markets to make decisions. When you try to take this kind of command and control approach from the center, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And that's how this industry was built. It was built on this way that all of the decisions are made by like one or two people. There's only one spokesperson or two spokespersons. There's only one person who can make all the decisions. That doesn't work anymore.
I just want to end our talk with a look at something I do on my podcast regularly, which is I ask my guests what is in their cultural inbox. What are they watching, reading, listening to at the moment that's left an impact? So what is in your inbox these days?
So this morning, I was actually listening. Do you guys know who Rick Rubin is? Okay, you need to go look up Rick Rubin, because Rick Rubin is this legendary music producer. And he's not like one of those music producers who only understands one genre of music and is known for one type of music. Like Rick Rubin works with everybody, and he was a creator of this thing called Def Jam Records. He has this new book called The Creative Act. And his ability to work across so many different genres of music, he says the book and this podcast with Krista Tippett on Being, it really explores this idea of like where creativity really comes from. And although like I'm not working in the music industry, I found this so inspiring because he pretty much says like creativity is not this thing that comes from inside. It comes from the world as you interpret it.
Or as you interact with it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and it really resonated with me because like as a creative person, as someone who's like been building this creative company for the last 15 years, like, and going back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, like my creativity comes from the world as I experience it, the world as I see it.
Yeah.
I would never have been able to create BOF if I hadn't been from this family that migrated from all of these different places, that my identity is so intersectional, it's so multifaceted, it's so multi-layered. That's why I'm able to create something like BOF.
Absolutely.
Like something clicked in my brain when I was listening to that podcast this morning. So I highly recommend Rick Rubin.
I mean, I think we all have these pivots in our lives, right? Which it's like stepping stones, and you connect the dots and you build from where you were, and it's like layers that you build on, and you have quite a few of those. So that was great, Imran. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you very much.